Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of the Taming the Polar Bears presentations. Today's topic is, as you can see, and as per promise, mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy. Now, that is, as I said in the blog piece introducing this, quite a long, unwieldy, sort of a tongue-twisting term. So before I get into what all that means, and we'll break it down bit by bit, and we'll understand all the parts and how to put it all together, I first have to get into a little bit of my background again, and why I feel this is so necessary, how I kind of came onto this and began practicing it myself, how much it's helped my sort of well-documented difficult case. And, that's a little bit important because, I need to sort of set the table for why I think it's so important for you. Okay, so, about 4 years ago is when I was really getting into all this neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, neurobiology, and all this fun stuff, because I was very, very driven to understand how this thing worked and why it did all the things it did. And But 2013 was also the year that was, and I kind of outlined this in the post, the mother of all manic depressive episodes and cycles. 2013 was a very, very, very wacky year for me. And I'd be hospitalized again in July of that year. And I would end off the year being hospitalized again. I spent the latter part of 2013 and the beginning of 2014 in my fifth and so far final, knock on wood, stay in a psychiatric hospital. Now, at that time, by that time, I had a good number of followers on Taming the Polar Bears. These people were all pulling for me. I had, things were so difficult for me. I had a personal support team, real life personal support team. And as I came out of the hospital and at the beginning of 2014, I understood this was more than about me. I had all these people involved. I had my daughter. I had all these people following online. And I knew for all kinds of reasons I couldn't let these people down. And B, I had to come to the very uncomfortable conclusion that I wasn't in control of what was going on up here. This is really difficult. We all like to think we're in control. And what I've learned, and I get into all the this is the big question in a lot of philosophy and neuroscience, who is in control and all this business about free will and blah, blah, blah. But I had to admit that I wasn't in control or didn't have enough control. And I needed to learn how to do that really quickly. I was running out of time. These things were unbelievably awesome forces that could take me in ways most people don't experience, many people don't survive, and very, very few people understand. So that's where I was at the beginning of 2014. I began taking some group therapy back then, and I learned some interesting things back then. But what I'd come across time and again was mention of cognitive behavior therapy. And, the question became, where do I find this? The answer is always somebody, professional. There's lots of community services, but they're not going to provide the kind of one-on-one attention you need to really learn cognitive behavior therapy. So, as many times I have learned, and as no doubt you people have been learning, it kind of comes down to ourselves. The whole point of Taming the Polar Bears is how to learn and do these things for yourselves. And Taming the Polar Bears is supposed to be not supposed to be, it is a guidepost, a kind of a roadmap, if you will, for, what to learn and how to learn it and how to do it. And why we have to do it. That's where all this blah, blah science stuff comes in. Okay, so that's where I was. Now, the other thing that combined what I was learning in neuroscience, in cognitive neuroscience, and the neurobiology of stress, and the psychology of stress, and all these things, was the power of our thoughts. So we can talk about a lot of things. Today we're just going to focus on thoughts. This is where the cognitive part comes in here. Now, this is the other uncomfortable thing I had to kind of accept. Now, I mentioned this in the blog piece introducing mindfulness meditation, CBT. I get into a little bit about thoughts there, and it's pretty hard. We go through all these things, and as I've outlined many times, there is a physiological reality to all this. It's not our imagination. We're not just making this up. So when you kind of have to, when you're told, you have to, it's your thoughts. You have to control your thoughts. This can make you, I'm sure you understand, it can make you pretty angry. Yet I, like I say, I was understanding all this from a neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience, blah, blah, blah point of view. And, when I sat down and examined my own mind on all this, which I was starting to do more in the beginning of 2014, I was really burned out from 2013. I just thought, okay, this is a lot about thoughts. Now, in a bipolar mind, you have kind of a literally crazy amount of thoughts. Your thoughts can go, and I've mentioned this before, but your thoughts can go way one way towards the negative, depressive end of things, and way the other way towards the optimism, positive, manic end of things. I always thought I just had to tame these negative, pessimist, depressive type thoughts. But what I learned was I had to tame those overly optimistic thoughts and herd them all into something practical in the middle. And, not only that, we're going to have lots of thoughts about the past, all these depressing thoughts. We're going to have lots of anxious thoughts about the future, all these anxious thoughts. And as one follower of mine once put it, it's like a blender in your head. It just gets going and it's whir. And, the power of these thoughts literally can make us crazy. I've been there. That's why I ended up in the hospital all those times. And or just break us down from stress. And neither of these things are good. So I need you to come to the same conclusion that I did, that, okay, these thoughts are powerful. I have to learn how to better deal with them or control them. Okay, and that's what, well, that's not what this is all about. This is just another tool. Okay, I have to be really clear about that. I was just rereading an article on CBT to get ready for this, and it was titled, "Why is CBT Falling Out of Favor?" And you know, I didn't have to read the whole article. I got halfway through the first paragraph, and there was mention of, you know, how it's a quick, easy fix. I just thought, you know, duh, this is the problem. When we think things are a quick, easy fix, we're in trouble from the get-go. As any regular follower of my blog will know, and as, you know, if you've just been watching these videos, you should be coming to getting to know. My position is there's no quick, easy fix for any of this. That's why I created the positive different making fundamentals, all these little fundamental habits, all these little tools that we're going to learn and you know, come to master. And this is just one of those tools. But I think it might be, I guess I say this about quite a bit of them, but I think this might be the most powerful, the best tool you can have. Okay, so let us get started. You know, thoughts. Let me just get to a little bit on thoughts. Now, I need to do an entire broadcast and blog post. I touch on thoughts quite a bit here and there throughout the blog, but I haven't really gotten a full dedicated post down to the real nuts and bolts, you know, the neuroscience of thought. It's not as difficult as it seems. I'll make it seem okay, but it's, you know, I just feel it's important to understand, you know, what thoughts do to us, where they come from. Now, we touched on that a little bit here and there, and I'm just going to touch on that a little bit more today, and why it's so important to understand and tame those polar bear thoughts. Okay, so now you know, a lot of this gets into this whole mind-brain thing, and this is a real wild philosophical thing, and like I say, free will is tied in there, and it's just it's a massive battle in the philosophy and science world, trust me. But there is, and I'm just going to go back to the little chart, the little brain illustration we used in the music therapy broadcast. You know, thoughts, like just about everything in our mind. You know, this is the brain. You know, it's really straight. Well, it's not straightforward, but it sort of is. It's just lots of nuts and bolts, just very complicated nuts and bolts, and some really kind of basic yet complicated, you know, chemistry and biology stuff. You know, you take one, if you take your skull and take that off and look inside there, you know, there's, you know, they all look the same from the outside. And you can carve all this up and find all these pieces. All this has been examined down to the, you know, micro nanometer scale. And, you know, nobody can look in there and say, you know, where you are. You know, all of this kind of produces you. All of this kind of produces your mind, what we think of as our mind. All of this somehow produces what is our consciousness, what I like to refer to as our conscious experience. Our conscious experience is kind of these burbly thoughts and ideas and mental states and all kinds of weird stuff like that. But now, where you are is kind of a weird thing, but we're going to kind of focus on this area up in the prefrontal cortex. And I'll get to that in a minute. Don't let all these terms and things intimidate you. They're just terms for different parts of the map, okay? Now, what we have been examining quite a bit so far is this part deep inside here. Let's go back to that a little bit. And here is our stress response system, people, or some of it, not all of it, but some of the basic components of the stress response system. This is where all the power comes from. Like I said, this is ground zero, Grand Central Station. This is the big power transformer that creates all the power that goes all over the place in your brain. And what is understood when we're, thinking this whole business of who we are and why we do things and where thoughts come from and all these things, is it's understood. Now, again, we're just going to kind of think of as we are sort of in this part of this super advanced prefrontal cortex of ours. And this is, as I've said before, all this stuff back here is there's some things about the human brain that are a little different, and why we can think and calculate and all these things better than most, well, seemingly better than most other creatures. But all of this is basically the same. What differentiates you and I, and hopefully all people, is this little bit up here called the prefrontal cortex. So we're just gonna say this is where you are up here. Okay, so what is understood is that there's way more brain traffic, way more brain power, way more data, and I'm talking, the actual signaling, originates from down here. Much more of that comes up this way than goes from this. Remember when I talked about music therapy, and in the post on the neuroscience of music therapy, this is where all our higher executive command controls are. And I'm going to get back to that a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so the vast majority of what's going on, we'll say, is coming from deeper down and traveling out, and there is signaling going from these higher executive control areas back down to here, but the majority of cases, and certainly when we are, in high cases of anxiety and meltdown and all that stuff, way more originating down here and coming up than it is going backwards. Okay, so big part of learning to deal with all that is called, and I'll write this on the board in a second, and this is kind of part of where this is all going, is we want better top-down management instead of bottom-up management. Okay, so with that in mind, that gives us a wee bit of an idea of where thoughts come from and why they're powerful, because these deep brain regions, and then there are some other related brain regions along with some of the basic stress response stuff we've looked at, where a lot of the things that are going on in depression and bipolar and all these things, that's where they originate more, and those areas just tend to have more power for all kinds of interesting brain evolution reasons that we won't get into quite today. I've touched on those a number of times in various blog posts. So today we're not going to worry about that too much. Okay, so let's now look at mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy. Now, mindfulness is a very old concept. So is meditation, 2,500 years and counting, nothing new there. Cognitive behavior therapy, relatively new. Anybody watching here can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, and I used to know this more, and it's not super important, but basically emerged in the 60s, I think. There's been long been different kinds of behavioral therapy, change the behavior and change the person kind of thing. Cognitive therapy is kind of more related to traditional talk therapy, which goes back to Freudian times. All this analysis stuff. Cognitive behavior therapy emerged when there are different branches of psychology that have been more aligned with cognitive neuroscience and neuropsychology. And what we today understand as cognitive behavior therapy, I believe, kind of emerged from that. So, all these things you can find. You'll find, if you Google mindfulness, you'll find billions of web pages and all kinds of controversy and wild disagreements and totally opposed camps. Meditation is just, again, you can Google that, and this is all stuff I follow all the time. This is my world. I'm following this all the time, all the discussions in the neuroscience groups and philosophy groups and psychology groups, and all this stuff gets kicked around all over the place. To make a long story short, where we are left, us poor mental health suffering people, is, we might hear about these things and go, okay, boy, that sounds hopeful. And how do I do that? And where do I learn about that? And, with all the different controversy and different things on the web, all the contradictory information and the battles, we just end up really confused and lost out. One of my number one goals of the blog and everything I do in Taming the Polar Bears is to sort all these things out, dig through all the BS, get down to the real crux and nuts and bolts of things, and work that out and try to understand it and teach it in a way that's designed for us people. To hell with all these professionals and all these people that promote all these things. People are either in it for the money or they're just cynical, and you end up with so many different viewpoints. It all makes your head spin, and that's the last thing we need. So Taming the Polar Bears has always been about sorting through these things and boiling it down to something that I could understand to begin with, get my polar bears under control, and to get it to, and translate that into something you can utilize. Okay, I have to adjust my butt here and move all this a little bit closer. I got smart and put this on the other side here so I'm not fighting it so much. Okay, so let's start with mindfulness. Now you will learn all kinds of, or hear all kinds of things about mindfulness, and there's all kinds of, it's one of these fads, except it's not a fad. 2,500 years of practice, I think we're beyond the fad bit, but nonetheless, old things get recycled and become a fad, and as usual, most people will screw it all up and totally misconstrue what it's all about and how to do it. So you'll be like, again, you'll find all these things about mindfulness, how to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to ask you to try set all that aside. If you remember our teacup analogy from a few weeks back, we're going to empty that teacup so we can put some fresh tea in there, some fresh understanding. So, my approach to mindfulness, and I try to, this probably doesn't sound very true, but I really do try to boil things down to the most simple and straightforward. Yeah, right, you're thinking, but bear with me. Mindfulness, we're just going to think of it as, if we hang on here. If we go back to mind, the brain and the mind. So let's go back to mind. As I said, the brain, it's a very, very weird thing, this brain and mind thing. The brain produces the mind. Nobody really knows where the mind is in the brain. But mind, consciousness, is kind of what we think of as ourselves and how we kind of think and guide ourselves through life. So mind is what we want to learn to understand and control more, okay? The way I think of being mindful is, and this is a great deal of what consciousness and all these things are about in the brain, is when mindful means what we are paying attention to, what we are aware of and paying attention to at any one point in time. This is really, really important. This is the whole crux of where all this is going. What's in our mind, what should or shouldn't be in our mind, and what we should be being mindful of and not mindful of. What should we be paying attention to and not paying attention to? The ancient concept of mindfulness, that's basically what it's all about, folks. Ignore all the other nonsense. It comes down to what's in our mind, what are we being mindful of, what are we being attentive to, what are we focusing on, okay? That's what we're just going to boil it down to. So this boils down to what we are attentive of or to, focusing on, what we are being mindful to, what is on our mind, okay? So the practice of mindfulness is just, the world's a big wacky place. There's lots of stuff going on. This is what drives us crazy, part of it. Your mind is supposed to be designed, ostensibly, very difficult in today's world, much easier in our evolutionary past in simpler times. But our mind is supposed to be kind of attuned and designed to, this is important, focus on this. This is not important, don't focus on that. Very, very difficult in today's world, as you no doubt have discovered. So, that's basically what mindfulness is. Where to put our attention, where not to put our attention. Mindfulness practice is just different ways of learning to do this better. Now I have a whole, I keep saying this, but I have a whole different kind of series of lessons on mindfulness and how to better train ourselves for that. Okay, but we're just setting the table here. This is just an introduction this whole business of mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy. Now, in the blog post introducing, and here's Mrs. Bean, in the blog post, I don't know what she, Mrs. Bean is being very mindful to different things here right now, and I'm not sure what. Now, in the blog post on introducing mindfulness meditation, CBT, another two key aspects of mindfulness were, in this business of what we're being mindful to is, and these two are super duper important, non-judgmental non-reaction. These are two huge biggies. Okay? Much of what's driving us crazy, much of why we end up melting down and doing all these things, too much judgment of all kinds, ourselves, others, you name it, too much reaction. Reaction is that deep limbic region stress response stuff, okay? So when we're in a mindful state, a mindfulness kind of state, what we're learning, these are skills. You're not going to have these to start with. I think we all, well, that's not true. You're going to have them. We all have them to a certain amount, but we're going to learn to build those and apply those more often in how we examine ourselves and our thoughts, okay? And that comes back to the, where we start tying this into CBT, okay? So there's some basic things about mindfulness. So again, push out all the other nonsense you learn. Well, it's not nonsense, it just overly complicates things. And just remember the few basic things we want to learn and the skills we want to build, okay? Now, the next part of the equation is this whole business of meditation. Meditation, sorry, my whiteboard's kind of noisy here. Meditation, again, there are just, billions of web pages and this and that on meditation and blah, 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 blah. And, again, you end up so confused. You don't know where to start, what to do. Why the hell should we meditate? Meditation, we get all these weird ideas about gurus in mountains and monks in saffron robes or weird tie-dye shirt hippies and all this stuff. And, again, we're going to ask you to block all that out, empty your teacup, and we're just going to put some nice, simple, clear tea in your teacup of understanding about meditation. Meditation is, really basically comes down to breathing. Lots of interesting science and neuroscience on the power of breathing and how that, all these chain reaction things that kick things out of control, breathing is what reverses that. And you get some, with simple breathing techniques, and by simple, I don't mean easy to master. This is a daily lifetime of practice we're talking about here. But, breathing is pretty simple. In, out, in, hold it, out, hold that out part for a bit. There are all kind of variations on that. But the breathing aspect of meditation, meditative breathing, is where we start to exert control from the top down. And breathing, simple breathing. And again, there's just all kinds of science on this, and it's another one of those posts I have to get to outline all this. But breathing simply controlling our breathing, because that can have amazing biological effects down here, not imaginary effects, biology, people. And that starts to turn around a lot of the things that are having so much power over us. So meditation, we're just going to, hang on, move this a wee bit closer again. Break that down into breathing. And learning that helps us learn where to put our focus, which ties back to the mindfulness part. That's why mindfulness meditation, we kind of want to learn how to work those together. So I have in my notes here to teach, well, I'm not going to teach them all today, but, all this complicated business about meditation and I'm not discouraging people, obviously, from learning the higher forms and more complex forms of meditation. But again, I wanted something that you and I could do. You and I could master, busy people could master, stressed out, busy people. And what I learned is from, I'm looking, I don't know, oh, it's on my other desk. Kelly McGonigal, Professor Kelly McGonigal's The Willpower Instinct. I've mentioned her many times. I should start asking her I should write her and ask for a commission, because I've sold lots of copies of The Willpower Instinct for her. But that's where I learned my two techniques. Forever be grateful to Kelly McGonigal. So I'm just going to briefly demonstrate the two. And again, no weird poses, no lotus position, yoga stuff, none of that. You just, wherever you are, that's the important thing. Like, this has to be doable anywhere, everywhere, anytime. So you basically, get comfortable. And this can be, once you kind of learn how to master this, it can be on the train or while you're waiting for the bus, in the office, all kinds of places. And, you want to, no, let's not worry about what our body parts are doing or anything. But basically, you're going to breathe in and really focus on the counts. So you're going to breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, and you really focus on 1, 2, 3, 4. So you breathe in. And as I breathe in, I'm counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, really counting, focusing on that count. That's really important. Focus on the count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then you hold it. Okay, so you breathe in, and then you hold it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then a control. It's really important. Controlled out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then, as you exhale, after you've exhaled, count to 4. And there's different ways of using numbers and different things. This is just a real basic place to start. So when you've exhaled and your lungs are kind of empty, this is really important again. Count again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then in. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And you just repeat that. Now you do that, say 2 cycles. In once, hold once, out once, hold the out part once, and you repeat that twice. That's quite powerful, even a few seconds. Okay? So when we control our breathing like that, we're controlling the inhale rate, the hold, because you breathe in, the natural inclination, the natural instinct is just to breathe out right away, right? Our daily breathing, in, out, we don't think about that. When we're doing this, we are, people, exercising something way up here in this prefrontal cortex. We are building gray matter. We are building muscle. Lots of controversy about this. Lots of people in the science, they're cynical people. They dismiss all this. I'm sorry, they're wrong. But this is quite demonstratable. And it's just, anyway, we don't need to worry about the science controversy. But this is what really convinced me. These simple things where we're, when we're doing this, when we're breathing in and controlling that rate, and when we're breathing out, and then holding it, and then breathing out and controlling that rate, we are sending massive signaling from up here down to these really deep elementary brain regions. I mean, breathing is as elementary as it gets, people. That's not even in the brain. That's way down here in the brain stem. That's so elementary. So, again, we are building signaling that goes from this top to the bottom. That, people, is what meditation is all about. That is it in a nutshell. Okay, so that's one type. So you practice that. In 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, out 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, but slower, like I demonstrated. And you just kind of repeat that. And, you can set a timer, 30 seconds, and you just focus on that. And you forget about the time. You forget about everything when you start to focus on, okay, I got to focus on these, each count. And you repeat that, and all of a sudden, ding, 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 the timer's up. And you go, holy shit, I meditated for 30 seconds, and that's fantastic. Okay? And then you go, okay, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. And then you try, I don't know, 45 seconds. And you'll find that's, not as hard as you might have imagined. I've taught this to a lot of people. Their reaction is all the same. It's like, oh, wow, that went by faster than I thought, and it wasn't as hard as I thought. And then you get up to a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes. I think, you don't have to master it beyond, I would say, 3 or 4 minutes. Awesome if you can, but you don't have to. Everything we're learning here, they're just doing, even say between 2 and 4 minutes, let's say, will have awesome amounts of power when we begin to combine it with all the other skills we're learning, okay? Now, the other one is a variation on that. This one, with the breathing is the same, but we're going to put our eye focus on a certain spot. You pick a little spot. I used to have a plant when I was living outdoors and stuff. I would just focus on, a tree, the scenery. That was, was pretty easy outdoors. When you're indoors or in your office and all these wild and wacky places, that gets a little more difficult. But we're going to practice when we're alone and not a lot of stuff going on. I'll get to this practicing alone thing in a minute. That's really important. So we're just to start, when we're learning this, we're going to find a quiet place in our home, hopefully. And I like plants because I have a whole nature therapy thing I tie this into. So I choose a nice green plant or a flower or something. Anyway, that's where I put my eyes. Okay. And then your hands have to go, if you're in a basic chair, on the arms of the chair or on your lap. You don't have to hold them in any kind of special place. You just kind of have to kind of make it consistent, on your lap or on the arms of the chair. And as you learn this and master it, you can find other ways to do that. But so basically, we want to keep our hands still, our hands and arms in a certain spot, and we want to fix our gaze in a certain spot. Okay, and then you're going to do the breathing again, and you're just going to try to keep your eyes on the same spot. Right now I'm looking at my little photo display of my daughter. So that's a little easier one than most. So, I'm breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm keeping my eyes on a certain spot and, moving my hands around for the demonstration. But when I'm practicing this, I'm making, I want to keep my hands still. So what's going to happen when you start practicing that is the natural inclination. Your eyes are going to want to go this way and that way, and that's okay, perfectly natural. And if that happens, you just go, oh shoot, and bring them back to your plant or whatever it is where you're putting your focus. And the same with your hands. Your hands. My hands are always busy, as you've noticed. So we tend to be that way. Our hands tend to be busy. They just move around by themselves, right? So this is another little thing, very deep motor thing. What our hands and body are doing. So we want to corral those babies, and so. As we're doing this, our hands might be tempted to itch our nose or itch our leg or do this or that. So while we're doing this breathing meditation, we will, we'll just keep working on keeping our eyes in one place. And, when the urge comes up to move our hand to do something, we'll just go, and put them back. And, and again, we just start off really slow, 30 seconds, set your timer, and you do that, and you're not going to do it perfectly right away. Your eyes are going to want to go this way or that way. Your hands are going to maybe do something. That's okay. Each time you just come back and, put your eyes back, put your hands back, and focus on the breathing. Really focus on, it's the same. Focus on the 1, 2, 3, 4 in, hold, 1, 2, 3, 4 out, 1, 2, 3, 4 hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Focus on those, each count, and that breathing. We'll notice our eyes move a little bit. We'll bring them back. We'll notice our hands want to move a little bit. Bring them back. We're just going to start with our hands, and we'll as we get better, we extend this to other body parts, and we extend the time longer and longer. Okay, so that's the basic meditation I'm talking about. So what do we control? We control our breathing. We control our focus, and in the second one we learned, we start to control where our eyes are and where our body movements. And again, people, let me get our other illustration. When we are doing that, we are exercising. Here, let me get this closer. And when we talked about the music therapy, we talked about this little part, the prefrontal cortex. If you want to know why everything's so damn hard to control, that's the prefrontal cortex. It's really small. It's just right here, kind of just above your eyeballs. So look at this poor little guy. This guy's got to control this big unruly thing back here. So that's a little bit why it's hard. This little guy, little girl, whatever, is trying to control all this stuff going on back here. But when we practice these little simple meditative techniques, we're building muscle up here and building confidence in this guy. This guy's, he's run ragged trying to control all this unruly behavior back here, and it's tiring. It's literally physically tiring. That's the subject of another post. That's one of the reasons why control is difficult. There's just a little guy trying to control everything back here, and it just runs out of energy. So when we do these quiet meditative practices, and my screen is frozen, don't panic, it should come back. There we are. That's what we're working on. When we are meditating, this little region way up here is what we're working on, and what we're doing is signaling back this way. I called it top-down control. I guess it's more front-end control. But and when we do this, people, back to neuroplasticity and music therapy and all these things we're doing, we are literally rewiring our brain. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, though people will try, okay? So that is mindfulness meditation. And I'm running long again. Now, let's try to speed this up a little bit. This is a little more straightforward. Cognitive. Cognitive is thinking, thoughts, ideas, all this stuff. This is kind of what goes off the rails. Thinking, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, all of these kind of things. Beliefs is kind of a weird thing. Some would say they're cognitive, some not. I absolutely tie them into cognitive stuff. Okay, so these are thinking. This comes back to mind. Behavior. Oops. Behavior, and I'm using the British Canadian spelling of behavior for all you American people. Behavior obviously is our actions and kind of what we physically do. So we'll have all these ideas and thoughts and blah 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 that goes on in our head, and the behavior is what we do with all that. And behavior is we're just going to think of it as our daily actions, our day-to-day actions. What do we do every day? Okay. And some of you, I don't want to think about that too much, but all these things we have to corral and get working better for us, okay? And then therapy, we talked about quite a bit last week, so I don't have to beat on that too much again. Sorry, I just need something to drink here. Iced coffee, by the way. Homemade iced coffee. Okay, so so cognitive is about thoughts, behavior, our actions. What do we do? Things we do. So that is. Now, to tie all that together into mindfulness, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy. So, what's next on my list? Yeah. Okay. So I talked. Just some of the keys, just to come back to the keys behind all of this stuff. We begin to learn where to put our focus, where to put our awareness, because these two things get wildly out of control, whether you want to believe that or not. We're going to really work on this, where to put our focus, where to put our awareness. Okay, so that's one key. 2, learning non-judgmental ways to think about all our cells and behaviors and all these things we're going to examine and work on. And as I've said many times, the whole basis of Taming the Polar Bears, the blog, is about non-judgmental, non-blame, more compassion for what's going on and why. Okay, so this isn't just a key fundamental, a key tenet of mindfulness CBT. This is one of the key foundational tenets of the whole Polar Bears approach, which is why this ties into what my whole basic principles for the Polar Bears. And non-reactionary. Okay. So, as I go through, how we approach some of these things, this will start to make more sense. But these are some of the keys I want you to start. I'd like you to take notes on this. These are really key to making this work. A lot of these therapies, if you look up a lot of these therapies, and you'll come across articles that say, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And, as a teacher for 10 years, a practitioner of a lot of things and a student of a lot of things, and, what makes people good at something and not good at something. If you don't understand the key fundamentals, and those aren't the basis of how you learn and practice it, and odds are you're not going to be very good at it, and it's not going to work. So we have to really understand the certain keys to it. Okay, so now when we are doing mindfulness meditation, CBT, let's look at some key things we're going to work on. Okay, so we are going to work on, examine, so on and so forth, our thoughts, our beliefs, because our beliefs can get pretty wild and wacky. This is a lot of what's going on. I've written some about this. I need to write more. Cognitive distortions. Now I have a whole post on cognitive distortions. Oops, I'm running out of room here. I have a whole post on cognitive distortions that absolutely ties into cognitive, obviously, what's going on in our head and thoughts. Okay, so that's a whole nother bit of background reading for this. But we're going to start working on, coming to recognize, understand, and work on cognitive distortions. We're not going to do this all at once, people. This is a daily habit. And we start off small and doable, but this is all part of our long-term goals, okay? I don't expect you to sit down and do all this in 15 minutes of mindfulness CBT, okay? These are things I work on these things all the time. 3 years I've been working on this, and I'm not going to get into the whole story, but boy, when I say I examine my thoughts, I examine every one. It was hard. So I don't expect you to do this all at once, okay? These are just things these are just part of the long-term goals and where we're kind of headed with all this. So, tying this in, we're going to work on and learn to recognize and understand things that are not true. Because a lot of our cognitive distortions, a lot of our thinking are things that are simply not true. That's really uncomfortable to come to terms with, but that's what we have to do when we go back to non-judgmental and non-reactionary things about when we're examining all this stuff in our heads. So we're going to examine things that are not true, but we're also going to start kind of bumping up against and coming to terms with some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. Uncomfortable truths. And, I was bipolar. I did a lot of stuff, and when I had to start doing this, I kind of created my own little mindfulness meditation CBT program, and I worked on it all the time, every day, and I'm kind of have to put my whole life on the plate. Not my whole life, but I have to, little bit by bit, I put all these different aspects of my life on the plate, during these little sessions. And, I had to go, okay, this is an ugly part of me, but, there it is. I don't like it, but there it is. I have to deal with that. Oops, sorry. Part of this is going to be kind of working on uncomfortable truths about ourselves. And the grand tamale of the whole kit and caboodle, folks, this is the end goal. This isn't where we're going to be at the start. This is the end goal. We're going to start learning and understanding. Oh, I'm running out of space again. I got to start all this over here more. Understanding, that says understanding. Control. Speaking of uncomfortable truths, this is kind of where we have to start. We're having all these meltdowns. We're in poor mental health. Whatever it is. And I was thinking on this earlier this morning as I was getting ready for this. And I'm going back in time to all those wacky times in my life when this was, there was no way to avoid that. This is out of control. And when we're contemplating suicide, when we are so melting down, we can't function. We understand that's not good, but what we have a real hard time kind of understanding is if we come back to our brain here, this is another big part of the brain. I try to separate you from the brain. That's kind of why I work on that so much. Our brain's creating all this, and this poor little, that's kind of where you are. If we want to think of you as being somewhere, that's kind of where it is. There's all these things going on that are in control, and kind of what we think of us and our lives are not in control. And this is, I spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I talked to a lot of people in there. And, they were all, regardless of whatever their diagnosis was, we're talking some horrendous cases of depression, beyond anything I think any of you have experienced. Schizophrenia, you see it all. And and I talk to all these people. I like talking to people and hearing what they say, and most of the times, life in the psychiatric hospital is still life. You make friends, you hang out, and so I hung out with people, and we just talk. And it was probably the one place in the world where we could talk and not hold back and feel okay about it. So people were very candid. People were very open about their lives and everything going on. And, you look at all that, and you listen to all that, and you put it all together. There's stuff going on in here that is not working well, we'll say. And these things that are not working well are what's in control, not you. So, when I say we're not in control, I'm not blaming you, saying, quote unquote, you were out of control. It's a lot of stuff going on in here that's out of control. And what we are learning, people, is how to take these little frontal lobe bits of the brain. And this is all pretty straightforward neuroscience. This is, this happens, this is supposed to control it. It just gets really, really difficult under a number of circumstances, and especially in today's really difficult world. Okay, so those are the things we're going to work on. Okay, so now the $64,000 question, jeepers. I'm already over an hour, or about an hour. The $64,000 question, how to do this. Um, Hang on. There we go. Got all my notes corralled together. Okay, so how? Now, this is a skill. Right now, we are, like I said, really, even if you have some experience with some of these things, I kind of want you to put that aside and think of this as learning from new again, okay? It's like, you've had piano lessons and, you can sort of play, but it hasn't worked out really well, and you've met a new piano teacher, okay? So regardless of your past experience or if this is brand new to you, I want you to kind of block out all the other things you've learned or any preconceived notions, all that stuff, and this is how we're going to approach it. Okay, so one, like all the positive difference making fundamentals, this has to become a daily habit, a daily routine. Like I say, so many things don't work because, they go into a therapist's office, they get some CBT, the therapist works with them, they make some progress. Hey, yeah, wow, I totally get that. You're an awesome therapist. I love you. And then they stop the therapy, they go out in this wildly chaotic world of ours. And, some people will be pretty awesome at it, but the world, kind of has this way of breaking you down. And, if this isn't part of a daily habit, and then there are other reasons, and I'm not going to be able to get to this today. There are other reasons to create, well, I'll touch on it a bit. There are reasons to make these daily habits, because the more you create something as a habit, when as the expression goes, when shit gets real, you want some really strong fundamental habits to fall back on, okay? So we make this a daily habit. That is important. So how to do this? Now, in various posts, and a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing negative self-dialogue, and this is I tie music therapy into this as well. We really need that private little quiet practice area, that practice time. The top athletes in the world, whoever they are, whatever they do, these people are the best in the world at what they do, and they are able to do that because they take private time away from all the pressure, all the things going on in the world, and they focus on building their skills. So I really want you to take the same approach. I want you to approach this as you take this time. And again, just like the meditation itself, we start off with a small amount of time to begin with. Let's say 10 minutes to begin with. And a lot of you with busy schedules and stuff, we want something small and doable. So 10 minutes. I tended to do mine first thing in the morning. You wake up and, if you're a family person and kids are the ones that are waking you up, this is challenging. But let's assume, you wake up and you're lying there and, well, hang on, this is, that works for some people. It'll work for me. It's not going to work for all people. But what you want is some time to yourself, and you're going to consider that your private practice time. And all kinds of things are going to be going on in your life and the world around you. There's some crazy stuff happening in the world today, as most of you will understand. And this is where the practice of the meditation practice starts. This is where the real power of that starts to show. Because when we learn those meditative practices, what we're learning is to block out other things and focus people on what's right in front of us. And right here, in this time, what's in front of you is you, your thoughts, your life, what's going on. Okay? So we pick a little time, and now we have to just go back to our CBT. This is really, really, really basic CBT stuff. So we set aside a certain time, 10 minutes, and the other, sorry, I'm jumping back and forth a little bit here. The other important thing, the time, space will say, the other important thing I want you to do is tie music therapy into this. I want you to pick a certain type of music, not favorite music, not pop music. I'm talking instrumental, I'm talking meditative type music, meditation music. I would strongly suggest some kind of jazz, instrumental jazz, classical music. Really important. Very calming, very gentle type music, okay? This is where we start tying all these different things, all these different skills we're learning, tying them together, okay? So I'll touch on why this is important more at the end, but I want this to be the key components of arranging our practice space, okay? And this is also kind of assuming that you're practicing the meditation techniques. Mindfulness is a little bit different. That's a little more challenging. And I've got sort of a whole thing on mindfulness I want to get to that again, takes away all this kind of complicated stuff. And, because the very, one of the fundamentals of mindfulness is it's supposed to be simple, but somehow people make it really complicated and get all the wrong ideas. So I'm going to do something kind of separate and very specific on mindfulness, how we can slowly train ourselves to be more mindful, okay? So, I'm going to assume that you're kind of working on this meditation a little bit. You're kind of working to understand the concept of mindfulness. And again, this is in the blog post introducing mindfulness CBT. Now, I got to move this a little closer again. This actual CBT business, oops, I think I'll use the black one. In the middle, we're going to talk about core, our core, and this is going to be things like beliefs, values, and so on. So this is kind of you. There's going to be others in your life. How do they fit into this or not? It's going to be where we're going in life, the future. You'll notice the past is absolutely absent from this. It's one of those this is kind of one of these ways we start learning to put the past behind us and not let the past rule us in our mental states, and work towards where we're going, because life doesn't go backwards, folks, it goes forward. So this is where we're going to start to deal with this better. Anxiety is generally about what's going to happen here, so this is where we start to calm down anxieties. If you'll notice, we're kind of tackling both depression and anxiety here. When we learn some of these new things to focus on, all this business of the past begins to fade behind us, and we become less depressed about that, and we become less anxious about the future because we're learning some concrete ways to make our futures happen in a better way. Okay, and then we have thoughts and feelings. Now, I'm going to, the webinar, today is Thursday. This is the introductory broadcast. I'm going to get into this in more detail in the webinar, okay? But just to set the table for that, oops, behaviors. Just to set the table for that, this is what we'll be looking at. Again, this little chart's in the blog post. You can find it there. But when we set aside this little space where we're going to be mindful, practice some of our meditation techniques, and that's, remember, blocking out other external things and focusing. When we do all those little meditation practices, that's what we're really learning to do, is how to focus and where to put our focus. That's where the mindfulness and meditation come together. So when we set this little space, we get on some music, and that music's going to begin helping us get into that space. That's why it's important to pick a particular kind of music and use that music kind of every time. Because, sometimes, it's always challenging to get into the kind of headspace and quiet space and block the world out. So our meditation is going to help. The music is going to help as well. Because when we start to learn how to do this, and that music is just playing softly in the background, and we're having, and we want to do this sometime, and we're having trouble, we put on that music, and that will, just like Pavlov's dog, people, help trigger us get into this kind of mental state to do this, okay? That's where all these things start to work together, people, instead of all these things, these wild external things working together to drive us crazy. This is where we get little positive things working together to get, learn better, learn ourselves better, learn better control, like I talked about in the key thing there. Okay, so back to the origins of cognitive behavior therapy. What you will find, and what anybody who studies neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience and all these kinds of things, our thoughts can influence our behaviors. Our thoughts can influence our mental states. When it says here feelings, that covers all kinds of things like emotions, mental states, up, down, happy, sad, happy, angry, all these things. So our thoughts control that or influence that. Our thoughts influence our behaviors. Our behaviors influence our feelings and mental states. We do something stupid, it's just going to create some difficult feelings. So all, like I've said, when I touched on this a little bit briefly, this is, when all gets wildly out of control, our behaviors start getting out of whack, those create difficult things or feelings, emotions, those create difficult thoughts, the difficult thoughts create difficult, and it all goes, like I say, like this blender that goes on in her head. And this is why life feels out of control, and it's one of the things that I'm really trying to teach everybody, and what you kind of have to come to terms with, it's not about the world at all. This is about you. This is about what goes on in here. This thing. So this is all about learning how this thing, how to get this thing under control. Okay? But, when we start, we're sitting there mindfully meditating. The idea is not to be doing any actions at the minute. And because we're being non-judgmental, non-reactive, we're removing some of this emotional component, and we're just focusing on our thoughts, okay? Now, this whole business of thoughts, as I said, we're going to, and I touch on this in the post, we're having these thoughts. Now, as difficult as thoughts are, as real and powerful as they seem, now this is the other uncomfortable, well, it wasn't really uncomfortable, it was just kind of hard to come to terms with. But I got there, and I'm going to try get you there faster than I got there. So you don't want to go where I was, trust me. Okay, so thoughts, as powerful and real and everything as they feel, they're just thoughts. There's nothing concrete about them. This is really wild, I know. And this was really difficult for me because I thought I believed my thoughts reflected the reality of my life. The things going on in my life were absolutely real. I mean, there's no question about that. I was, had no money. I was homeless. That's real. That stuff's real enough. But the thoughts themselves are not. Okay? I'm going to sort of, let's let that sink in a little bit. The thoughts don't have to be there. The thoughts don't have to be as real as you believe they are. They don't have to be as powerful as they seem to be. You're talking to a bipolar person. I had nuclear, it is literally not possible for you to have as nuclear grade thoughts as a bipolar person. Seriously. The people who study all this stuff would tell you that. So I get it. But what I learned, and it helped that I was learning all this through the study of science and all this. This is why I worked so hard at studying all this, and this is what I'm trying to pass on to you, is thoughts are just thoughts. They don't have to be there. So that's where we start. They're going to be hellish. They're going to be powerful. I talked to a lot of schizophrenia is not the right word. I talked to a lot of people who heard voices. When you hear voices, it's literally like somebody's in the room talking to you. These aren't just thoughts in your head. And I've experienced this. I know exactly what it feels like. It sounds like there's somebody right freaking there, but you can't see them and they're talking to you. It's wildly disconcerting, I can tell you. But even those voices, so whether it's just the voices in our head that all people have, or these external sounding voices that some people experience, about 10% of the population, those are just thoughts. And as real and powerful and as hard as they seem, they are in fact, well, not totally in fact, if we get down to the actual microbiology, there's little physical stuff to them, but all that can change. This abstract concept of thoughts, all of that can change. And, if I could, it would take me hours to try to explain how far I've come with just simply understanding and controlling and changing my thoughts from Certainly where where the worst of this started in 2008, and this was a hellish, and I do mean hellish, inner horror show from 2008 through to 2013, certainly, and a good part of 2014 as well. If I could tell you how far I've come and how I did it with just understanding this whole concept of thoughts and learning to control them and change them and create new ones, that's what it's all about, people. That's how you tame the polar bears. Okay? So this is where we start. We start with examining our thoughts. When I say thoughts, I include cognitive distortions. Really hard to come to terms with all these things that seem so much a part of our minds, so much a part of who we are, so much a part of our daily thoughts. But when we learn that some of these are in fact cognitive distortions, I wrote a whole blog post on this to tell you how common this is. This is not some personal flaw of yours. This is all human brains will have cognitive distortions. Yours just happen to be doing more damage to you. You're more aware, you're more painfully aware of the consequences of that. That's part of what's going on. So, thoughts, cognitive distortions are a part of that. And we start examining the truth of these and start pushing back on them. And, we believe, nobody likes us. We don't have any friends. And, for a small percentage of people, this will actually be true. That's one of those uncomfortable truths I mentioned. But even the uncomfortable truths, what we're going to find, and this is kind of what the whole polar bears is about as well, regardless of where this examination process is. And, it can be crazy making in itself, examining our thoughts. That's why it's really important to come into this little quiet space and do this in this really structured step-by-step way. But when we start examining some of these things and pushing back on them and realizing, oh, that's distorted thinking, let me give. I'll just give one example of cognitive distortions. It's called black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is like literally when everything is either black or white, this or that, good or bad, ugly, beautiful, and it's very common, and it creates massive difficulties for us when everything is either or. Where, in fact, most of these things we see in life are on a gradient, and there is no this or that. People are mixtures of all kinds of things. Many things in the world are mixtures of good and bad and all kinds of different aspects, and it depends on a number of factors and how we look at it. But when we, are constantly in black and white, either or, it really creates cognitive difficulties, I'll say. Okay, so I am wildly over time again. But again, this is an introduction. I'm eventually I'll break all these down into shorter segments. And, I'm trying to tie together some, a lot of really different things. These will be, like I say, even if these are not, even if you're familiar with these, I really want you to see them in a different way. So just to recap, these are all, let's go back to where we started. Mindfulness. So mindfulness itself is a little bit of a skill. Very simple and straightforward as I approach it and try to teach it. And I practice mindfulness in many, many things I do now. And like a lot of habits, it starts off as kind of a weird thing. Our minds are used to going all over the place. This is a big part of the problem. When you start kind of understanding the concept of mindfulness, where to put your mind, where to put your awareness. And I tend to do that, like even going back to 3 years ago when I really had to knuckle down and get a hold of all these things. And I mentioned this I think last week in the talk on music therapy. I created a whole little kind of routine for myself where I kind of imagined, I was in a Buddhist monastery sort of thing, and I broke everything down to really, really simple routines. So I had to, do a little bit of housework every day. I had to do a little bit of personal hygiene work every day. I had to practice, the meditation. I created a little schedule for practicing the meditation and things like that. Baking and cooking, all these things. And, I really, really broke everything down to simple fundamentals. And this is kind of what everybody needs. And so, I said, okay, it's my day and time to do the floors, for example. I put all my attention and focus on exactly that. Moving the broom around, making sure I got everything, every, part of the floor and corner and nook and cranny. And I as part of the training, I train myself, and this is where I need you to go, not to think of other things, because, sweeping the floor obviously seems like a pretty mindless activity. So, this is a big part of the problem with a lot of people and why they get into so much trouble and can't seem to do anything right. They, they're have this task to do, yet their mind is all over the place. And, we can maybe sort of do that, but what's going to happen is you're not going to do this task very well, or not as well as you could, and you're still going to be driving yourself crazy. So you have the worst of both, but every world. You're not doing your task as well as you can, and you're letting life drive you crazy. So I learned to master mindfulness, and I can't say master, but the process of mastering, by giving myself these little chores, focusing, putting my attention on the details of the broom, the details of the floor, all these things. So, I have a whole kind of program for teaching mindfulness. The meditation, those simple techniques I taught is, all you really need to think about doing. If you get beyond that, you want to learn more than that, awesome. But what I talked about, what I taught, those simple steps, that's really all you have to do. Rinse and repeat. And then the cognitive, we learn to deal what's going on in our mind more using, these are powerful tools that help us learn to better do this. Then what we do, kind of, this is, I kind of like to, I I kind of like to think of this as, this is kind of level 1, this is level 2. Behavior is kind of level 3, where we start matching our behaviors, start creating behaviors that match what we want going on in our thoughts, where the behavior starts to reinforce the thoughts reinforce the behavior. That's what cognitive behavior therapy is supposed to really do. And these things start to create better control over what's going on way down in our deep limbic region that creates the difficult emotions and feelings and mental states. And the therapy part is, as I've been discussing, this is the stuff that we really need to take seriously to rehabilitate the damage and all these things that have been going on in your brain, okay? So that is a horrendously long show. I apologize, but, the material is what it is. It takes time to get to it all. I will be, redoing these and breaking them down into smaller segments. But for now, it just you obviously, it's a recording, you can just press, if this looks too long to you, just watch 20 minutes or get through one portion of it, press pause and come back to the bits and pieces as you have time and can go along, okay? So I will see you on Sunday for the webinar where we will kind of get into the how of this a little more detail, and hopefully you'll have questions questions, ask questions. Okay, so see you Sunday. This is Taming the Polar Bears. And if you want to know what Taming the Polar Bears is all about, oh shoot, where's my, oh, I can't, oh, here we go, I'm all unorganized. You want to know what Taming the Polar Bears is all about, go to Taming the Polar Bears at blogspot.ca or write to tamingthepolarbears@gmail.com. Bye now.